My affinity for music is something I have difficulty expressing, especially when it comes to its capacity to kindle powerful emotions. In almost every aspect of my life, I try my best not to base my decisions, my worldviews, and my expectations on my emotions. I don't like to make choices based on how I feel about things, especially since strong emotion can lead so often to regretful action. Music, for many of us though, is like a personal escape into the complex and tangled realm of our own raw sentiments, our pain, our excitement, our anger, our passions, and even our forgotten memories. I can't really explain the experience I had the first time I opened the galaxy map in Mass Effect. I guess what I experienced was a revival of sorts for a deep passion I had forgotten about. I experienced a distinct reminiscence of a summer night in 1992 when my dad and I were looking up at the night sky. He was showing me the constellations, how to connect the dots and put the images together. What he taught me that night, which came from nothing more than a passing interest in astronomy, opened my mind in a way that filled me with this all-encompassing feeling of wonder. I don't know if there's even a word for it. It was like a sweeping astonishment mixed with limitless fascination and a pure reverence. Afterward, I became obsessed with space and astronomy. I wanted to go to summer camps, I wanted to read books. I even had this super cool headset that came with these cartridges you would plug in, and the program would quiz you, and you had to give your answers through the little microphone. It was awesome. I spent countless hours doing the same exercises over and over again. I just wanted to learn as much as I possibly could about space. And then, time went by. I got involved in sports, I became busy in school, I developed other hobbies, started pursuing girls, and ended up forgetting about how much passion I once had for astronomy, until I played Mass Effect. When Uncharted Worlds came on, the track that plays while you navigate the galaxy map, I felt a piece of that same sense of awe that I felt as a kid return. Suddenly, I felt that the scope of the game opened up to me in a similar way that the night sky had so many years ago as I bonded with my father. And the context of my experience with that game completely changed because of it. Years later, I was replaying through the series leading up to the release of Mass Effect 3, and my dad came in to see what I was up to right as I was using the galaxy map and was immediately intrigued. Once again, Uncharted Worlds played in the background as I explained how, in the game, you could travel through space and even land on several different worlds and explore them. My father, who has zero interest in video games, and with whom I struggled to connect with since adolescence, sat and watched me play Mass Effect for well over an hour. And once again, this music became a link to a feeling that was now not only tied to a powerful realization I had had as a child about how small we really are, but also to the strong bond I had with my father, as well as two of my cherished memories with him. And I feel that every time I listen to this track. Recalling these memories over the last week or so has made me curious about the nature of the relationship that we have with music. I'm sure we all have similar stories where a piece of music has left a profound emotional impression and has given context and meaning to our lives in some way. But why is that? Why is music so intuitively and intrinsically linked with our emotions? There are lots of fascinating studies being carried out to try and answer that question, some of which I could talk about for hours if I wanted to. But to be brief, it has a lot to do with rhythm, and the way that rhythm activates not only the auditory cortex, but also motor areas of the brain as well, even when participants were asked specifically to remain completely still while listening. In other words, music, which is driven by rhythm, literally moves us, And movement, especially the energy and speed of movement, is something we closely associate with specific emotions. This is why anime lines and camera shake, which display fast movement, are used to suggest urgency and excitement, while gradual moving shots and slowly descending sweat beads and so forth indicate depression, embarrassment, or other kinds of negative feelings. For example, why is this considered happy music? And this, sad music. Well, much of it is learned through association. In other words, we see certain kinds of music used to signify specific emotions, observe as they're used repeatedly throughout the media in recognizable patterns, and therefore learn to categorize slow-moving rhythms along with minor scales as being sad or generally negative, and fast-moving rhythms alongside major scales as happy or generally positive. I think it goes a lot deeper than that, though. The thing that really separates humans from other animals is our genius for pattern recognition. It's innate in all of us, something that evolved in our species a very long time ago and has allowed us to thrive in ways that are not possible elsewhere in the animal kingdom. It's why our ancestors connected the dots in the sky and created stories about the figures they saw in the cosmos. Humans have become so efficient at recognizing patterns that it's become an essential part of our identity. We not only see the patterns, we use those patterns to impose structure, order, and meaning on the world around us. This unique ability to not only recognize patterns, but also predict them, is also uniquely attuned in our species. Humans are capable of hearing a rhythm and within seconds syncing up as they predict when the next beat will come, while other primates, for example, are not able to predict the rhythm, but can only react to the last beat they heard, which keeps them from ever truly getting in sync. Even certain kinds of birds, which can appear to be syncing their movements with the beat of a rhythm.
His favorite band is the Backstreet Boys.
Seriously, bird? You could have just, walked straight into my joke, but no, you gotta like the Backstreet Boys, not, struggle when the BPM changes or dips too far below a specific rhythm that they tend to have an easier time with. So, while it's fun to imagine that this bird recognizes and appreciates the sheer brutality of this polyrhythmic metal riff, the truth is, he probably isn't feeling it the same way that I am. This ability to predict the beat and move with it is tied closely with the reward and pleasure centers of our brain, where dopamine is produced, which is why it's pleasurable and satisfying to listen to good music. At the heart of one's appreciation for music is the ability to process its structure, to recognize the patterns and sync with them. If the music becomes too predictable, however, then the pleasure of learning the pattern is lessened, which shows us the mark of a truly skilled composer or songwriter. Those who have mastered music composition understand what their audience's expectations are and can manipulate when and how those expectations are met in ways that aren't immediately predictable, but are truly satisfying. Music has often been referred to as the universal language, or the language of emotion. And how true that is certainly a debatable topic, but it's undeniable how truly instinctual our affinity for music is. One has only to watch how a baby reacts to music in order to understand this, being able to move and synchronize with the beat, as well as experiencing increases in mood shown through smiles and laughter. One has only to witness a young mother singing a lullaby to her child to see that there's a connection between them, a communication that in many ways is deeper and more effective in sharing emotion than language could ever hope to be. Speaking of language, why is it that when we talk to each other, we don't just
speak robotically with a minor tone mode?
Why do we alter our inflection and intonation? It's because these arrangements of speech that move in distinct rhythms and patterns have meaning that we've associated with them. And language at its most basic level just cannot carry that same meaning. It's the reason why we misunderstand each other so much when we're just using instant messaging or text. It's a primordial sense, something primitive in all of us, where we can attach emotion, which is the prism through which we experience life, with the patterns that take place all around us, creating meaning and purpose in our lives. And music is one of the most natural methods in existence to facilitate that process in the human brain. We've evolved in a way that makes it so. When I was growing up and gaining an interest in filmmaking and beginning my own creative endeavors, I wondered why movies and games had soundtracks. It's a little strange when you think about it. We're watching these characters on the screen and observing their stories, but they're accompanied by sweeping orchestras and bombastic percussion sections. I mean, it's one thing if we have diegetic music, which is music that is actually coming from within the world we're looking at, like elevator music or the sounds carried by a PA system when the characters are at a concert. But non-diegetic music? Music that exists only for the audience's sake, but is not coming from within the world we're observing? What's the purpose of that? Have you ever imagined what your favorite movie scenes would feel like if you removed the music?
My dear Dr. Sattler, welcome to Jurassic Park.
It's all wrong, isn't it? But why? Our real lives aren't accompanied by John Williams music, so why does it feel right when the characters of our favorite movies receive such a luxury? It all started with the advent of silent film, where we had figured out how to make images appear as if they were moving, but still had no means to put those moving pictures together with sound. Rather than making the audience sit and watch those images in total silence, a musician would sit in with them and play arrangements on the piano, using music as a universal language to suggest the emotion the characters were feeling. Music was the most efficient method they could come up with to solve that problem, and it was natural. It worked because of this primordial sense I've been talking about. Years later, when sound became an integral part of the filmmaking process and the actors' vocal performances could be captured, music still remained a central part of the experience. And the reason for this, in my opinion, is because when we go to see a movie, or when we sit down to play a game, we're not necessarily interested in experiencing a perfectly realistic representation of our world so much as a hyper-realistic representation. We want to see and hear and feel things in ways that are more intense, more profound, and even more importantly, unexpected from what we would find in our everyday lives. We seek for the opportunity to experience patterns that we would never encounter through normal living, patterns that can serve as challenges for us to synchronize with, but are also satisfying to learn and master, which can give us vicarious experience to learn from, and which can deliver powerful emotions. Again, the prism through which we experience life itself. In my experience, there is no other art form more efficient at communicating emotion than music. Music is evocative, it's metaphysical, it's overwhelming. It's a transference of something so raw and organic that language simply isn't adequate to describe it. Try as we might, it's just better to share it with someone rather than try to explain how it makes us feel. And there are few social interactions more satisfying and efficient in sharing our emotional experiences than in performing and listening to music together. It's been a pastime of our species since before recorded history, and was a form of communication that some preliminary research is suggesting predates the invention of language, and to this day is more effective at conveying emotion and facilitating learning. This is why we create songs to teach our children the alphabet, and how we're making breakthroughs in communicating with and understanding people with autism. And it's also why music is such an essential part of the fiction we consume. It's why soundtracks are so important to the movies we watch and the games we play. In Mass Effect's case, Vigil is another example of a piece of music that transferred a feeling in me that revived that sense of wonder I felt as a child. It's such a simple tune, but it's also masterful in how it manipulates and delivers on a recognizable pattern. And it's also a huge part of the reason why I was able to connect with this game, its characters, and its ideas on such a deep level. Without such an excellent soundtrack, I can say with certainty that Mass Effect would not have been the same for me, and I'm sure many others who have played the game would agree. And the same is true for every game and every movie I've ever connected with emotionally. Beautiful music in its many forms is what helps me make sense of my emotions, giving them purpose and meaning in a life where I do my best to not allow them to dictate my decisions. When I immerse myself in good music, I find that I'm able to achieve a sense of clarity that I've never been able to find in any other way. My life seems to come into focus, and things begin to make a lot more sense when I spend time with Nobuo Uematsu, Yasunori Mitsuda, Joe Hisaishi, Austin Wintory, John Williams, Howard Shore, Yoko Shimomura, Misha Mansour, Aaron Marshall, Jeremy Soule, Hiroki Kikuta, and many, many others that I don't have time to list. I'm struggling to know how to conclude this video, which tells me that I'm trying too hard to explain it. So I think instead, it would be fitting to let the music do the talking.